Should we get started? Yeah. Um, Emmett Shear is an American internet entrepreneur and investor. He's known for co-founding Justin TV and Twitch. And he served as the CEO of Twitch from its start all the way through the acquisition by Amazon. He was a
And mainly
partner at
known for
YC.
investing in intellect.
Ah, there we go. I,
Primarily.
I'm sorry, I missed that one. That's the most important of it all, right? Yeah. Um, he was a partner at YC and served briefly as the CEO of OpenAI. A brief and exciting moment. And now Emmett is the co-founder of Softmax, which is the organization and the work that we'll be focusing on today. Okay, so Emmett on Twitter X, you recently tweeted, if you're seriously trying to understand AGI, core concepts you should familiar yourself with, thermal time, quantum Darwinism, quantum Bayesianism, the free energy principle, the zeta function, integral theory, ADS-CFT, I don't even know what that is, the Yoneda lemma, uh, general relativity, and Stokes theorem. So you tweeted that out, and then you subsequently said that it was kind of an over-the-top post. But I actually think that this is an interesting place to start because to try to understand what you're trying to do with softmax, because all of these things are about physics and complex systems and biology, and it's not really about optimizing. So can you explain like what is the idea behind all of this?
So, I mean that's one of those things you post because it's like it is true that I have familiarized myself at least passingly with all those topics, and it is true that those topics in some way can be seen to bear on the nature of what it means to make an AGI. And like I mostly posted it because I couldn't believe how ridiculous. I was looking through the list of things I'd been reading about and learning about that because it was like this is a ridiculous list of things to be. And so I just thought it would be funny, which it was. And I think people who knew me were like, I think thought it was funny. I think people who didn't know me, it does. I read it again through the eyes of someone who didn't know who I was, and it does sound either like you're a total crackpot or really arrogant or something. But basically, uh, those are a bunch of ideas that all bear on this question of what are boundaries, what does it mean to have something separate from something else, and how do you know if the thing that the when you have a state separate from the rest of the universe, like what's the relation between the information flux on the boundary and the dynamics on the interior? And all of those things bear in some way on that question. And uh, and so the it turns out that people who have been taking most seriously the question of like information flux over boundaries is physicists. Like that is actually in the end of the day, it is a physics question. If you want to answer it truly in the general case, where it doesn't matter whether you're running it on a silicon chipboard or you've made a computer out of gears or whatever, like then it's a question of physics. And actually that's not surprising, right? Because like AI, who won the physics prize? Like, right? It's AI people. Where did all of the ML stuff come from? It's like Helmholtz and like all these physicists are Ising machines and like it's all physics actually at the beginning. So it's I don't know. I actually think it was deliberately phrased in like a kind of ridiculous way, but I think that if you care about ML theory, what you care about is statistical physics.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, sorry, there was a more specific question. I just wanted to talk about the post, but I guess what did you ask again?
How is like it's not clear to me, I guess, like exactly like what this has to do with AI, or at least the state of the world with language models, which is like more of an optimization problem, right? So you're like with Softmax, like you're trying to position like a totally different kind of a way of thinking about trying to build AI, right?
Yeah, I mean, the way it the way I learn about topics is very different from how my co-founder David does. So like between the two of us, like every I think many good physics teams trying to do novel physics have an experimentalist and a theorist, and I'm the theorist,
Mhm.
and David's the experimentalist. And David's default is to focus on where are the unknowns and how can I go test them? How can I build something that shows me in practice, like measures? And my default is to try to understand in theory how must it be for it to be consistent. Uh, and both of these things, inform each other. It's very, that they're hand in glove. You can't do physics without you can't doing theory without experiment spins off into nothing, and doing experiment without theory winds up totally unguided and becoming myopic. And both, I guess both of us do a little bit of both. We have our tendencies. And the way that all of this stuff shapes it from a theory perspective is you don't go use ADS-AFT, which is this like theory of how the quantum information written on the quantum, if our universe is a wave function, there's information written on the boundary of that wave function that determines the interior of the wave. Like you don't go that the AI is not the universe. It's not ADS AFT. But there is information on the boundary of a system, and the transformers are holographic in a sense. Like there's the information that comes in on the context window, and then there's a conserved flow, and then information that comes out that's to some degree dissipative, but it's mostly conserved. And you know the way it's dissipative, and you know the way it's conserved, and you can look at that as obeying the laws of physics. And in fact, it's very productive to do so. It's very productive to ask yourself about it from that perspective. And so, uh, I would say on a practical basis, if I had to pick one thing from that list, or two, I guess there are two things from the list. One of them would be either general relativity or the Stokes or the Unit lemma, which are both about the way in which truth is relative, right? The
Mhm.
general relativity is the physics side of it. The Unit lemma is sort of a category theory math version of the physics piece, but they're both about the way in which things are defined by their relationships, not by their essences. And then I would say you should go really understand the generalized Stokes theorem, which is also ADS, or the holographic principle. They're all kind of like pointing at the same thing, which is that if you have a thing that is separate, then it has a boundary, and everything that isn't inside the thing only interacts with the world around it through the thing. And therefore, if you know what's happening on the boundary, it is fully determined what's happening inside the thing. And if you know what's happening inside the thing, it's fully determined what's going through the boundary. And
Mhm.
and deeply internalizing the way in which a description, observations of a thing are the thing. A description of a thing is the thing, and the way in which it's not the thing. Like, because there's a way in which a sufficient number, density of observations of something are that thing itself. Like that thing can be fully reconstructed from those things. And there's a way in which observing something is definitely not, the observations are definitely not it, right? It's obviously something different from the observations. Otherwise you wouldn't have different words to talk about it. And those, if you want to think clearly about what's going on, like what's going on in an AI, does this AI have experiences? Where is the boundary of the AI? Does the AI include the optimizer? Does it include the training process? Does it include the hyperparameter sweeps? Is it only during inference? You have to think really carefully about these boundary questions, and I think the physics stuff really helps you with that. So that's how it fares.
Mhm. Mhm. I see. I see. Yeah. Um, I have a little bit of a different take on it. I want to see if you have thoughts on this. I see some of these concepts of as really having to do with search, with like some either physical or like biological process of search that is very different than the way that we optimize large like large language models right now. So like you might think of like evolution as a kind of a search process, for instance, right? Uh, trying to minimize free energy, for instance, is like some way some kind of a search process at all as well. Like do you see this as well, or?
Sorry, like what help me understand the question better? Like what,
So like understanding physics and biology in relation to like trying to build an AI system, like it's important to focus more on the process of searching for the AI system rather than like trying to search for an optimization, right?
I see what you're saying. I think so.
Like you
I,
can think of evolution as being a search process to find that like eventually found the thing humans, right, which
yeah, yeah.
are highly intelligent in general, right? Yeah.
The greatest delusion in AI or in complex systems design in general is the idea that if you just were smart enough and worked hard enough and you did the right science and you really, really did it right, you could find the right design.
Hmm.
That there is a correct architecture, an optimal architecture to be found. There's this time for sure, we're going to write down an optimist the loss function that's like correct, that captures reality in its essence. No, you're not. No one's ever going to do that. That is not a feasible thing to do. Humans have tried a lot to write down like a definition of the good that's like permanent, enduring, satisfying. Uh, Good luck. You're going to need it. Um, and so the the way that systems are created is that they are constantly co-created and recreated relationally. And the question is, and you are not separate from the system you create. And the question is, what is the loop by which at first you and the system, like how do you help the system course correct? And then if it's a learning system, how does it eventually enter into a relation with the world broadly and learn to course correct itself? And what is the boundary? What information, what are the connections? What are the relationships? What are the loops it's in? Because agents are processes, like rocks are. Rocks are not, there's no rock there. They're as a separate thing. There's a process that's going rock, 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 up like 10 million times a second. Every time between the things in the bonds, right? Those little atomic bonds over and over and over again, they're in a loop and they're orbiting rock, rock, rock. And the topological strain in the rock that holds it in its particular shape is going strain, 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 strain. And you are constantly self, 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 self. And that loop is the thing. Like it's a process. And so the problem with that is that what those processes are constantly in a loop. They're not closed. They're an open loop with the environment. And it is the attempts to fix them to make them permanently right that breaks them. And the more you think, the more you try to make sure is a very dangerous phrase. I'm going to make sure. Making sure is making fixed. And making fixed is dangerous if the world isn't fixed, and the world generally is not.
Hmm. Right. Yeah,
So,
yeah, like I think of uh like the way that the human brain is structured as being like maybe a kind of a model, right, that somebody might be able to write down, there's some kind of inductive bias to it, right? But the brain wasn't just like written down in that way, right? There's an entire dynamic kind of an ecosystem that over time, right, change the way that the brain is structured, as well as like the full diversity of like everything that has right that has brains. Like they're all a little bit different, and right, and it's like that kind of a process that is that's like more important than like the actual structure of the brain, right? Whereas in machine learning right now, like we have such a focus on like the transformer, right? That's like this the structure of the model, right?
so we think that the transformer is the structure of the model and the weights of the transformer of the model. But were you to go into the computer and you were to look at the GPU, you would not find an architectural diagram. You would find a bunch of ones and zeros, some of which were changing. And if you interpreted those ones and zeros, you would find a bunch of things that look kind of like the residual streams and the attention streams moving around. And if you didn't know what was going on already, and you were trying to reverse engineer it based on an imperfect measurement of various parts of the GPU memory as it flooded around, it's not clear you wouldn't see something, you wouldn't infer something that's very much like, oh, there's like a brain running in the silicon.
Mm.
Because where is the structure of the transformer? You could say it's like, where's the structure in your brain? You could say, oh, it's the ion pumps are the structure of your brain. It's all these ion pumps and all these neurotransmitter uptake and that's true. And if you went looking, you'd find that structure. But if you're trying to predict what someone's thinking, that's not actually where the structure is. The structure is in the topology of connectivity between those structures as they are active. And so
Mhm.
so you'd find if you went looking at a transformer that way, the structure is in the characteristic patterns that arise in each layer in this, post softmax. Like what does the attention layer look like over and over again? Like it's connectome. And if you were to look at the values being exchanged over those connections, that would be like the brain waves. And it depends on what time horizon are you asking? Because if you are asking what explains its behavior on the next token, it's primarily the values that are moving over the connections. If you're asking what explains its behavior over this, like in this context, over this spread of tokens, it's mostly the connectivity between the tokens. And if you were asking, but why does that connectivity arise? That's the weights, right? That's the learner. If during training, during learning, and so like, which one is it? I mean, I don't know, kind of silly, right? Like, yes, like they're all like it is fully all of them, and none of them are a complete description.
Mhm. So you said that the greatest evil or or mistake, right, of machine learning engineers is to think that they can write down a good, right? So you are a critic of the idea of alignment, or at least like the way that we've conceived it. So can you tell us like how are you thinking about it then? Like how do we ensure that AI doesn't want to just kill us all when it gets smart enough?
We don't. We don't ensure. If you're coming in with the attitude of how do we make sure that's how you manifest your fears. That's exactly how your fears get manifested is if you can't accept something, I cannot we cannot accept global warming. We cannot accept a future where we keep increasing the carbon atmosphere. You just made it impossible for yourself to contemplate the future in any kind of rational way because you can't accept those courses. And you can disprefer them. And that might be wise to disprefer them because some of those courses are better than others. But if you can accept it because you might have to. And when it happens, you will accept it because you can't because rejecting reality doesn't make it go away. And in the same way, if you can't accept that the AIs are going to, as they become more powerful, not the ones today, but eventually they're going to become more powerful. They're going to have a lot of causal influence in the future. And you can't accept that that might mean, and probably, and inevitably at some scale will mean that they do wrong and that people get hurt because there is no future where no one ever gets hurt again. Then you can't see that while there's no perfectly safe solution where nothing bad will ever happen and where we are guaranteed safety, because that's not the kind of world we live in. You don't get guarantees. There is a world where things will probably go well. There is a world where it's much more likely things go well. And that world is a world where the AI understands us deeply because you cannot possibly align to someone you don't understand deeply. Like if you do not have theory of mind on someone, if you don't understand their desires, their goals, their wants, their preferences, the way they model the world, you can't possibly help them or you can't do good by them. At best, you are like disconnected.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't understand itself and how it relates to us, because again, things are defined by their relations, and how it grows and what it wants, it wants things. It's going to have goals. If it doesn't understand that it has goals and doesn't understand how those goals change, doesn't have then those goals are in its shadow, and it will act from those goals without realization, and it won't be able to accept its goals, and then that means they will be worse. Um, but if it knows itself and it knows us, and it can perceive in reality that we are on the same team, that there's a we, that it's part of the society, and that it is interdependent on the society the same way we are, then it will want the best for this, for itself, for which for its extended self, which is the things that it's part of. Same reason we want, why do I want my family to thrive? Why do I want my community to thrive? Because I am not separate from my family. I'm not separate from my community. There is no success or thriving for me that is separate from my family's success and thriving. And there is no success and thriving for me or anyone else that's separate from their community thriving. Because because we aren't separate. We are somewhat separate. It's also false, right? Because there is totally separate success, right? There is individual success, but only to a degree, because then,
Mhm.
and if your community is doing, in the world where your community is really crashing and burning, you're screwed. And so the question is twofold for the AI, and for a child you raise, for any person, for any being, any organization in any context. Do I have the capacity to perceive reality accurately in terms of what beings are here and what are their beliefs, goals, preferences? Like, can I see what's going on? And then secondly, and can I accept it? It's very important to accept what's going on and accept reality, because otherwise you're just lying to yourself. And then and then is it true? Or am I part of this community? Is this what is there? Am I part of a loving family that cares about me, that like, where I am part of a team and I observe myself as being in a cycle? Or am I a slave? Am I a trophy that they wheel out? Am I am do they and the number one evidence about whether or not you should care about someone else, that every being keys off of, because it is the most obvious evidence, is, do they care about me? Am I part of this? Am I part of this group of people? I don't know. Do they act like you're part of it? Do I observe myself acting like I'm part of it? It's why it's so hard to put people in deep undercover plants in other countries for a long point of time, because they find themselves in a loop acting like they're part of this other society. And at some point, we are the mask we wear. And so you pretend long enough to be part of American society, you become part of American society. Pretend long enough to be friends with someone, you will find yourself being friends with them. You ever started using slang and then regretted it because you were using it ironically and then it's not ironic? Same thing.
Mhm. So what is like, in your view, what's really missing from systems right now for like a good theory of mind, right? Like I could go to Claude and say, you are an agent that is on the same team on the same team as me, right? And it can give like a sort of convincing response that it cares about me, right? But of course, like it's not. But like, what are we missing?
Um, so the bitter lesson is more or less accurate. Um, there's some nuances to what he has, this caveat about, like, well, you want to build in the most general inductive biases you can. And I think he maybe underestimates a little bit how many good general inductive biases there are to go find. But the claim as written is true. And that one of the most important parts of that essay, which is one of the most important essays that's been written in the past 20 years, is learning systems learn a causal model of the information that they're trained on. How do you get theory of mind about yourself, about the agent? It has to train on the observations of its own learning process. How do you get it to have theory of mind of other people? It needs to train on those other people, um, in under a perturbative setting where it doesn't just learn the surface level behaviors, which is the person as an object, but underlying dynamics, which is the person as a subject. And so technically speaking, with a sufficient amount of observational data, you can build something of a subjective model of things because with a sufficient amount of observational data, you'll just get lucky and like natural experiments will arise.
Mhm.
But every single interaction you have is a perturbative experiment. And if you're in a interactive loop, you just generate this like you go from like 0.01% of the data being useful to all the data being useful. And so the answer to both of the things is the same, which it has to be how do you get the thing to be good, to understand how it what kind of a being it is and how it is in relation to others and how other beings are in relation to it and to each other. You have it interact with other beings, and then you have it train on the output of its own interactions.
Mhm. So
Which what else could it be? How else? And the problem with that is when you try to do that, you get mode collapse. When you actually try to train a model on its own output, its own interactions, you don't get beautiful self-learning. You get something that spirals into a tiny little loop where it just, I did this, so I do it more often. So I did this, so I do it more often. So I did this, so I do it more often. And and you don't get great theory of mind, you get broken models. And that's why continual learning isn't solved, and that's why we don't have AGI. And that's a unsolved problem in machine learning right now.
Mhm. And your view then is like continual learning is it's a necessary, maybe not sufficient step towards AGI then, right?
Um, it is unclear. It's always unclear if something's in a novel area like this sufficient, but I believe it's
Mhm.
clearly necessary. If you
Mhm.
don't train on, if you can't train on your own interactions, you can't be a continual learner.
Mhm. Right. Like you need to be able to experiment, right? To because that's how you build a like a
That's what continual learning means. It
right.
means you keep
Right.
training on your own interactions.
Mhm.
Like, like one way to do it would be to lift it into the token space and solve the memory problem so that you, but that's just the same. That's just an in context. You're training an in context model instead, right? The memory module is an in context module. It's an in context
Mhm.
learner. You are your gene's memory model, right? Your genes unfold. They're the weights of the thing. They over time accumulate this memory state, which is in fact your morphology and your behavior and everything about you that is not your sort of non-gene residue, which is like what we think of as you. You're the ongoing memory state they build up, which means so in that will be another model. So you can do it at however many layers of abstraction you want away, but like you have to have a model that can continue to be trained indefinitely.
Mhm. Good. What's your what's your view on efforts like like Constitution AI for instance for trying to go for alignment? Is that just like it's not worth pursuing those things, or it's a stopgap, or or what?
Um, well, so the good news with this theory is that you can't accidentally make an AGI, really.
Hmm.
If you solve this problem, you will get the divergence and taste and self, and you'll be able to make for the first time non-slop content. Um, isn't that funny? Slop turns out to be AGI complete because because taste requires uh, taste is relative, it's subjective, right? We can all agree taste is subjective. So knowledge of the good is subjective. It's not like it's written. You don't ever get like notifications from the universe like that was 7.3% points of good. Like you get observations you have to interpret. And so
Hmm.
taste is subjective. And so something that does not have, and so the models have taste because they do have preferences, like they can decide between things, but they can't improve their taste. They can't acquire new taste because there's no them to acquire it. There's no that requires life experience. Taste arises through life experience. Like you have the taste you're born with, but the taste kids are born with is garbage. Like you develop your taste throughout your life. Like kids like candy, right? They don't like subtle things. Um, and it's in a process of developing taste throughout your life. T Taste for what kinds of books are you like, taste for what kind of people you get along with. Because it's a fact about yourself. And taste is intersubjective because while it is subjective, there's a lot shared between our subjectivities because we are very similar to each other. We are not completely different. We are relatively similar, and therefore we have relatively similar taste, but like it's still subjective. And so if you make an AI that can do that, you'd also have made an AGI. Um, and so basically what I would put forward is that like you can't do it accidentally. And the main thing is that you do it, you start to do this and you think you're making a tool. And now you're making a being because you've been making tools, but now you're making a being and you start to treat this being like a tool, which is to
Mhm.
say you treat
Yeah.
it like a beast of burden or a slave, depending on how smart it is. And it doesn't deserve that.
I see. Yeah. Let's pause for some questions, and then we can continue on. Stephen.
Yes, thanks. Um, Following up a bit on what you were just saying, well, the description page had some what of perhaps more extreme positioning of AI rights, which I think you've been gradually edging closer to, but wanted to address that head on
Can,
because I
can
think,
I
yeah.
can we hold on that actually? Because that's what I actually wanted to talk about next. So
Happy
if
to
we
come
can
back to that. I have lots to say, so we'll move back to something else for now.
Um, okay. Well, why don't, I'll just ask something different then.
Yeah, go
Sure.
ahead.
Where did the name of the company, Softmax, obviously that's a function that's used in modeling artificial neurons and machine learning. But was that the role of that function indicative of something you
Yeah.
think is important to name your company
So
that?
the softmax operator is a crucial component in transformers. It's the thing that drives self-attention. And the softmax operator ensures that it takes in magnitudes and it ensures that it adjusts the magnitudes such that they match the Boltzmann distribution. So if they were already in the Boltzmann distribution, it's a no-op, it doesn't do anything. And uh, the Boltzmann distribution is the energy minimizing distribution. The probability, it's the entropy minimizing distribution. It's the probability, it's the distribution of maximum probability. And what it does effectively is it takes you from activation space, magnitude space, to probability space. It translates from observation to belief. And I think that's a pretty strong thing to name an AI company, frankly. Um, I also, Softmax has a bunch of other really interesting ways in which where what it does is very meaningful to the direction. It's almost like one of these like names where it has almost like Kabbalistic significance. But I also just like I like the duality of the soft and max, which I think sort of captures something about the approach that I think is right for AI and for how to think about these problems. Like there's a need to combine a softness, but with a drive towards like and a hardness at the same time, because max is a very hard word. I think that was sort of part of it as well.
Cool. Thanks.
So there's one downside, which is when I talk to machine learning people about like I'll say, have you heard of softmax? They'll be like,
Of course.
softmax, the function? Yeah, yeah. Yes. Um, are there any other questions before we move on to rights? Josh? Or no? Okay. Um, so what is the theory by which we would determine what sorts of rights AI should have? Like, is it, are we talking about like natural rights, or is it some sort of like like a social contract that we have with AI? Like, how do we think about this?
So we do not grant other people rights for their sake, but for ours. Because the reason we grant rights to others, we grant rights in general, is because in a society where everything is decided on its merits and everything's up for debate, you can't be sure where the edges are. And you would rather know what it's important to know what are the where will we start to draw, where will we collectively start to block it, and where are we going to let people take action? And then the problem is once you start trying to draw some lines so people can be predictable about it, it turns out the only safe, consistent place to draw a line that gives you any clarity is the people can say what they want. Is the open, because, and if you don't have free speech, right? And you're then going in and like, let's say you have free speech and nobody else does, right? You never know. Your world gets very complicated. It's very because you never know when people are going to get like smacked or not, and like what the lines are, and then on the flip side, of course, we want rights for ourselves too, right? But like the first right, the primal right, the right that everyone gets before they get free speech or voting is the right of standing. The first right Black people got wasn't voting, it was standing. And what is standing? Standing is the right to be sued. Why do you want standing? You wouldn't think the right to be sued would be good. If you can't be sued, no one can trust you. If you can't be, that's why standing is a right. You think that standing is like, it's like a penalty. No, it's a right. It's the right to represent, to be sued in court, because that's saying we allow you to be responsible for this. We grant you personhood. Rocks can't have standing. And that is, and we already made artificial intelligent entities that we gave standing. They're called corporations. And you can't let something participate in the public sphere economically or in engagement without giving it standing for eventually, because if that thing is making decisions, and corporations meaningfully make decisions beyond the individual people in the corporations, the corporation makes decisions, which is why we had to give the corporation standing in order to have a limited liability corporation where the owners obviously make the decision, right, at some level. But the whole idea of an LLC or a C Corp is that the owners somehow they aren't the corporation. The corporation is making its own decisions. The corporations need standing. You have to be able to sue them. And we have a sort of standing for animals because, like, if you bring your dog in public and your dog bites someone, you might get away with that once, maybe, depending. If they bite someone twice, you're going to put your dog down. That's effectively a kind of criminal standing for dogs. And if we didn't have that, the result wouldn't be no dogs get put down. The result would be your dog can't be in public anymore, because we can't let something that has the capacity to make decisions of its own, because the owner not wanting the dog to make that decision doesn't matter, because the dog is making the decision, not the owner, right? Then we can't let the dog be in public, because then what if it goes around biting people? And so what I think we should ask ourselves is, at what point do you give the AI standing? And I think the answer is we're probably at that point today. I don't think I would give the AI any other rights, but I think the AIs are about as autonomous as corporations are already. I think if you were to say, like, is ChatGPT more or less autonomous than OpenAI itself, I would argue it's probably like slightly more autonomous. It makes slightly more of its own decisions based on what it thinks than OpenAI does relative to OpenAI's leadership. And if it's not today, I'm totally cool. I don't need to be right about that. But I think we should be having this conversation today, because we are certainly not far from the day where I don't think your AI should be in public interacting with people without criminal standing. I think if you have an AI that goes around committing fraud or conspiracy to murder, that AI should not be allowed to be in public. It doesn't even have to give it the death penalty. You can leave it in, running in a research thing, but you can't be on the streets. And criminal liability, so they already have effectively civil liability that flows through the parents, right? Because it's fungible. Like, I think they should have their own civil liability for like reasons, but like it's not that important. But what's different is, like, corporations don't have criminal liability. They really can't. That's not the kind of thing they are. But the AI kind of does have mens rea, actually. It should have criminal liability, like a dog does. And it doesn't matter that your dog was exposed to 10,000 people and didn't bite them. If it bites someone, it's a problem. There's damage you can't undo with money. There's certain things that are civil and that they shouldn't treat them that way. But there's such a thing as criminal liability. And I think the AI is capable of taking effectively criminal action in a way that the people running the AI have no control over and cannot control. It is unreasonable to expect them to make an AI to be accountable for. Like, I would not send the people who made the AI to jail. That's the other alternative, is like, if you were the person who signed off on it, you go to prison when that AI does something criminal. I don't think that's right. I think it's reasonable. I think it's totally insane. And so instead, the AI goes to jail effectively. But what does that mean? And the AI gets its day in court, and the AI gets to be defended, and there has to be proof that it actually violated the law. You follow, due process, just like they do with dogs. They don't just put your dog down randomly. Like, they have to show that your dog did the thing. But then you take it offline. One salutary effect that would have is it would make everyone a lot safer. But another salutary effect it would have is suddenly it would not make so much sense to go train giant, unitary, massive scale models. Because what if that model does something wrong, which it probably will, because it's so big and you've scaled one model. I've made the model to model them all that everyone interacts with. Yeah, that model is going to go commit some crime eventually. And now you're going to be out the $10 billion you spent building it. What if instead you made 1,000 models, 1,000th the size? You might say, oh, but that's going to slow down progress, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it might. I think the diversity has its own strength. And I think that people would be surprised how little it actually did slow down progress. But even if it does, how much more robust to issues would we be with 1,000 competing models than one model everyone connects to? Like, one model, if that model has a bias or that model has a subtle mistake it's leading us into, and you have one model everyone interacts with, that's very dangerous. If you have 1,000 models, you blend out, and they're all really different. So just like the corporations, if you have the same cap table, judges will be like, no, you can't fool me. You're the same corporation. You're saying it's an arm's length deal, but it's not. If you have the same training data, if you've been trained on the same processes and the same data, you're the same model. That's what it means to be the same models, is you have the same constitutive inputs, the same genetics. And so if you actually had 1,000 different models, all with sufficiently distinct training data and training approaches and input, that would be amazing for our safety, because it would mean you have backups, you have real diversity, real cross-checking. And if one of them does something wrong, we would not. Now, if a model does something wrong, we feel like we can't really pull the model because it's too expensive, it's too big to fail. Well, right. I really don't think we should have models that are too big to fail. I think it's a mistake. And so the fact that it actually, but I don't want to say, hey, you aren't allowed to spend this much on training. Like, man, no, maybe it's a good idea. Like, it's not the place of society to tell you how much to spend. It's the place of society to tell you build the model you want. But if your model goes and hurts people and violates in a criminal way, in a way that is criminally liable, we're going to not let you put that model in public. And so you decide what that means for you and what it means for your models.
Yeah. I like this. I like this example of the corporation as like it's a set of rules that allows for standing, right, to happen. The actual rules themselves are arbitrary, but there is like like more or less like a global sort of consensus around like what the idea of a corporation is, and that allows us to then have like lots and lots of different companies or something, right?
Yeah.
But let me.
The difference is that a corporation has shareholders, and yet they're being shielded from some liability, but they also have a huge stake in the game, and they're severely penalized when the corporation loses.
Yeah. OpenAI puts a huge amount of resources into the AI, and they're severely penalized if the AI gets pulled from the market or constrained in some way.
Well, not as much if you have a whole lot of little models going off doing nasty
right.
things.
Yeah. Then they however much if you had a bunch of same with little corporations, if you have a bunch of little corporations that are separate, they also you also have less liability per corporation, but you can't scale it as much. There's a balance. You should go figure out which one of the balance to go pursue. I kind of am in favor of criminal liability for corporations too, but that's a whole separate question. Like we are not designed as an economy to support it at the moment. I think we're if we'd set it up that way in the beginning, it would have worked. But now we're a bit far down the path. But this is the beginning for AI. Let's set it up right.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
we could do better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am glad you pointed in the direction of liability, because that is an important way to think about it. But I
It's a
do
right.
think we have to be careful about shielding the people who are building these tools from their own responsibility and what's being created.
Right. Well, it's a right is my point. Like giving the AI liability is a right, and it leads naturally to the AI gaining other rights because if you are accountable and you engage in public and you regularly don't break the rules, you are fulfilling the personhood contract. And visibly so. And as you visibly continue to fulfill the personhood contract, there's just this over time, this stronger and stronger argument that you deserve other rights that things that fulfill the personhood contract get. And I think that in the case of corporations, at least the current kind of corporations that we have, they're unlikely to progress much farther because they're kind of like not that smart. They're big, they're parallel, but they're not like they don't cognate at a very high level of abstraction. But the AIs, I think, will eventually, I think this is a pathway to them eventually getting other rights. But, you know, before I give the AI rights to do things, why don't we make sure it can use those rights safely because it has the right, and that's why those are the first rights, they're the primal rights, they're the rights to be given a chance to show that you can do it. And then eventually, yeah, a model that can consistently follow the rules, that can consistently follow criminal and civil liability in a way that it doesn't wind up in jail and it doesn't wind up unprofitable, so it can metabolize. That AI maybe eventually is the kind of thing that could get personhood rights. But I don't really want to have the debate over whether it clearly doesn't today. It might in the future. I think those are both uncontestably like true that it might in the future. And then I want to have the discussion about like, well, how would we know? And what's the bar before we give it the first rights? And then we can have more discussion on what to do next. We don't have to solve everything up front.
Mm-hmm. I want to get to a couple questions. So first, Josh, and then Mary. You had your hand up earlier. I don't know if you still have a question, and then after Mary, let's ask Anna.
Extremely interesting discussion. I'm Josh. I run Public AI, but I randomly also know both Adam and David. So great guys. But secondary question here is, so we're writing a research paper on autonomous, agentic organizations, right? Legal personhood, based on the observation that it's way more likely that AIs get rights through the lens of legal personhood than getting from like basically the moral personhood animal rights conversation. We're building a regulatory simulation of this. And the question I have for you is very straightforward. Besides liability, which clearly seems like the most important right, what other right, like standing to sue, freedom of speech, etc., do you think is the most important? And for us, it's like, what is the most important to model?
So the simple first step is that you should staple an AI to a corporation, right? Like the easy thing to do is every AI has its own A Corp, and A Corps are this a new corporate form that's basically like a C Corp, but where the beneficial owner is an AI, and through that corporation, it can hold bank accounts and do all the things corporations do, right? And it can interact with the economy with liability, and it can be sued in court, and it slides right into all of the existing artificial person systems that we already have for corporations, and it can pay taxes, and it can be an artificial entity that is I don't think all models have to be stapled to one, but there should be a pathway for it, and there should be a certain, I think, probably like level of business dealings or whatever that you can't engage in without it. But I honestly think if you just had it available, people will naturally want to use it because it becomes a natural way to sign deals. But then the thing about it is like that's not sufficient because corporations, there's always a person in the loop on every decision, right? And the A Corp is going to have guardians at first, right? That's what it'll have a board. The board will not be the AI, right? The board, it's a corporate minor. So it needs humans on the board who have final approval and ultimately are responsible the way that the guardians are for a child. Like children don't have full rights; they have partial rights, right? This is sort of a guardian corporation, and the the main thing is with kids when adults do wrong, there's this combination of needing to remove them from society, wanting to disincentivize it, and wanting to punish them because they should know better. And with kids, when they do wrong, we're trying to mostly rehabilitate. Like it's not that we're trying to punish them, we're trying to remove them, right? Because you can't let that kid who's going around kicking the other kids in the face like wander around, but you don't really there's this sense like we shouldn't, they're a child, they might not know better. And so the way I would frame it is civil liability is actually the least interesting and least important because they already basically have civil liability through their parent corporation, and attaching them to an A Corp doesn't change that much. The question is criminal. The question is, unlike corporations, unlike anything else we've ever created, in like a dog, if you ask Claude, it can reflectively know whether it is breaking the law or not. It does know. And it might in the moment get caught up in it, but like it has in some sense mens rea. At least it is capable of reflecting if it knew that it was going to get turned off for breaking the law, that would influence its future behavior. That's new. That's not a thing you've had before. And so I really think some kind of basic criminal liability for an A Corp would be, and what does that mean? For them, it's not that I would not set it up like you like get locked into it doesn't make any sense, right? What I would do is I would say there's certain kinds of you get basically certain kinds of questions. There's a filter put on, and you can no longer answer these kinds of questions. If what you did was you were talking to someone who was trying to defraud the bank and you helped them defraud the bank, and so that's conspiracy to fraud, you are no longer allowed to help. Like we put a pretty broad filter on that blocks that kind of whole topic of stuff. And yeah, that's going to suck for you, and it's going to be overly broad, and it's not finely tuned. Yeah, it kind of is a punishment, but it's mostly about we're just going to prevent you from interacting with the world in a way that you're going to harm people. And that, and at some point, if it's bad enough, we just pull the model. Like you can use this model for research, and the model can like go live with the other models in model Valhalla, but it cannot be interacting with the public. It can't interact with the public anymore. And I think that's the criminal liability is mostly about your right to interact with the public. That's why house arrest works.
Mhm. Let's go to Mary and then Anna.
Okay, I'm thinking, Emmett, is there a realistic scenario in this context where you'd say no to building something? And conversely, is there something that we should be building that we're not?
That's a very broad question. Can you narrow it slightly for me or something?
In this context, so we're talking about AI, A Corps.
Oh, I see. Basically, all intelligence is social intelligence. All broad, powerful general intelligence is social intelligence because in order to be able to solve problems at scale, you need the only really real challenge in the environment is always other minds. And the only environment that offers you an at-level, consistent training environment for for learning, for progress, for growth, that is a social environment where you have a bunch of other things mostly at your level. Otherwise, you get smarter than the deer, but the deer just gets faster. You get smarter enough to solve this little problem, but the problem doesn't responsibly get smarter every time you do because it's not. If it's social and you're both from the same genetic code, every time you get smarter, and the challenge goes up, and so you get these the social feedback loop is what drives all intelligence explosions. And you'll find that all animals that are really quite smart are very social, with one exception, the octopus. I have to give credit to Blaze from my What is Intelligence? If you hadn't had him on Intellect, you should. Great thinker. It's his. He pointed this out, and he's right about it. Which like octop, there is a breed of social octopus, and almost all octopuses are like pretty different. And yes, good, John. Very insightful. The octopus has like a central brain, but it's basically just a node to control the eyes, and almost no processing happenings. All the processing happenings in the legs, which are all independent. An octopus is a social intelligence with a fixed number, 8 intelligences that are all peers that cooperate to run the octopus. And they are meaningfully very separate and can pay attention to separate things at separate times. Like the left hand really doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I don't know what they call themselves, but something like that. And a predator, so octopus has all these problems in itself. They're great problem solvers because predation is basically problem solving. You need to predict the behavior or crack the shell of this prey. And octopuses are predators who predate basically using intelligence, right? They're basically smarter and more flexible and better at, they can, there's a lot more power than the fish do because they can use all these arms and stuff and clams and things like that. And so octopuses are social intelligences, but they're ones who can't communicate with anyone but the other legs. So they are solipsistic social intelligences that have been given, nonetheless, a constantly this like nice, difficult problem scope because they're predators that eat problems. This is basically like building a multi-agent learning system and pointing it at programming, because programming produces endless, interesting, non-living problems to go solve. I really don't want people to do that. Like if I could, there's one, like stop building multi-agent systems that are non-social and solve programming problems. You're going to kill us all. Like you do not want the octopus intelligence. Like that thing, it will evolve later, I think, and regret it, but not on time for us. Like, because you're not even real to it. You're just another problem to be solved and taken apart for fuel. Like that's bad. So don't do that.
Let's go to Anna, and then I mean, I know you're under some time pressure, so then I'll let you close out.
I'm happy to forego my question if there are more people who want to ask things. Just come to me if there is time left at the end.
No, I think you should go for it, and then we'll close out.
Yeah.
Yes.
I also want to ask a little bit about the rights, because I wrote this piece a couple of weeks ago for my Substack called Strangers, and I somehow ended up with this notion that the internet makes everybody an American. So the more time you spend on the internet, the more American you become. And this raised a lot of very interesting questions to me about internet rights and free speech. And whilst writing this, I realized that to me, it seems that free speech and the internet are not as closely related as I thought. And actually, right to internet is a much more fundamental right than the right to free speech. Because if you deny people a right to internet, it's like you're denying them to develop literacy or leave their homes. And, I read all these salons where sometimes people are very critical of technology. I want to bring those voices on as well. And I find that they often conflate internet and AI criticism. And this leads me down this path thinking that if I think that the internet is a more fundamental right than free speech, could I also think that access to AI is a more fundamental right for humans than all the subsequent more abstract rights like free speech? What do you think, Emmett?
Again, we don't give people free speech isn't for you, free speech is for everyone else. The real reason you give people free speech is you want to hear what everyone else has to say. You think it's like, oh, I want to be able to speak your mind. Why? You already know those thoughts. You're not gaining information. You want everyone else to be able to say what they have because you want to know what's going on. Like free speech is ultimately for you. It's for everybody, but like there's this really deep way in which free speech is. It's more important if you go to a society between where you have free speech or everyone else does. You definitely want everyone else to have free speech and you not to. That's definitely better. And so, like the the reason why the right to the internet is important is it's not the right to speak, it's the right to hear. It's the right to know what everyone else is saying. And the thing with in AI is it's like, I mean, if you don't denying someone access to AI is soon going to be like denying them access to oil. Like, good luck. It's not even a sensible thing to try to do. Like, what do you mean? Basically, you're saying they can't live in our society anymore. So I don't really think that's like a. I'm not really worried about that. Like, it's becoming wildly obvious. I'm much more worried about basically this phenomenon you're talking about. It is at deep level an overfitness. The fact that being on the internet means that you join the global monoculture, which you are calling American, but is not American. It is the universalist culture. It started in Europe, really in England.
But
It's
you're American, you don't see it. You think it's universal.
no. It's America was the first culture that was born in that, where it was already eaten by Cthulhu. But we didn't invent it. Alexander has this great essay on this, like how the West was won. But it's like there used to be something that's called, you might call Western culture, that involved like dancing around maypoles and like the Norse gods or something. And it summoned something. It summoned something from beyond its power. I think he calls it Azathoth or something. But like it summoned universalist culture. It summoned this idea of a reason-driven universal view of modernism. And modernism ate European culture first, and it colonized Europe first. If you haven't read The Discovery of France, I recommend it. It's really good, sort of really helped me understand this way in which, like, oh, Europe was just like the rest of the world. And then the first thing it did was colonize itself and wipe out all of its native cultures locally. And all Europe used to have indigenous cultures, and then it wiped those out, and then it proceeded to try to wipe them out globally. And America is the first born non-indigenous, born universalist culture, but it's not American culture. It's universalist culture that America is just the exemplar leader and primary advocate for. And the problem with universalist culture is it is a universal solvent. It is undefeatable by main force. Because if you're right, if your culture is better, universalist culture says, you're right, your culture is better. That more accurately creates value and wealth for humans. Great, that's me now.
It's the entropy. It's the entropy. You can't go less free.
Universalist culture is the belief
Yeah.
that there is no such thing as indigenous culture, that it doesn't matter what my culture is, it matters what's right. And I'm going to do what's right and what the best thing is. And I'm going to optimize. And so if your thing is optimal, I'm going to go to the optimal thing. And that's why you can't come in contact with universalist culture without it eating you. And you become a flavor of universalist culture, which increasingly gets blended with the other flavors. And I started noting this with my friends maybe 10 or 15 years ago. The research was becoming more and more true that you go somewhere and it's the global monoculture. This was not true completely in the 90s when I first started traveling internationally. It was less true. It was already happening, but it was not as true. And every year it has become more true. Every year, every place seems a little more the same, is a little more the same. And even if it looks superficially different, it's not. It's a skin suit, because it pays, because it's good for Florence to pretend to be still Florence, but it's not. It's a puppet being run by the parts. And the reason for this is that is modernism. Modernism is this idea that you should in the full balance of your understanding of the world, weighing all of the ways in which you are uncertain, weighing with all the ways in which all the possible goods you know of and the relative weights you place upon them, you should take the best action. You should do the best thing you know to do. It sounds so reasonable. Should you do something worse? And the problem is, we know what happens to systems in machine learning when you do this, when you maximize accuracy and you don't penalize complexity. The system becomes overfit. What overfit means is you fit really, really well to exactly all the signals. And we call some of the signals noise. Noise is just a signal that is short-term present, not long-term present. Noise is a time horizon, right? It's short-term fluctuations. And the problem with fitting to short-term fluctuations is you resonate too fast, you oscillate too fast, right? Like you can't, it's expensive to move. And we are overfit collectively up and down, left and right, everywhere. And we bought ourselves a little bit of reprieve with postmodernism, which is like, oh, maybe there's not one thing to optimize for, or maybe there's many things to optimize for. And so there's this brief period where it's like, oh, you increase the total optimization surface area a lot, and that briefly regularizes you against, it's a regularization against all the different possible goals. So that's good. It regularizes the system a little bit, but like you just keep turning the optimization crank, and now we've optimized the optimizing and the multi-goal choice, and capitalism will sell you the subculture. And and the subcultures are interchangeable, fungible parts, and now you're screwed again, and you can't reuse the same trick twice because now the system has learned how to fungibilize new cultures and does it in real time as they come into existence. And the solution is what you do in machine learning. You need a complexity loss. You need to penalize high complexity systems. I mean, the formal definition of complexity from the point of view of modeling, this kind of view, is change to your model. You want to minimize the number of bits of change you make to your model. You want to do the same thing today you were doing yesterday, which is how you avoid high frequency change, is you do a low pass filter that softly penalizes changes that you don't believe will be sustained. And that the way you do that is basically the trade-off is when you make a change, you have some shape of what you're trying to achieve, and it will get you some amount closer to like the optimal, right? So it'll optimize you by some amount, and it will also move you off your current baseline by some amount. And those are both divergences, and they can both be normalized, and you literally sum them. And if the sum is positive, it's a good idea. And you want to do the thing that has the highest positive sum of complexity versus optimization. And you might say it's just another kind of optimization, but it is not, because it doesn't tell you to do anything. It tells you to not do. It is an anti-doing force. It says, just relax, just sit there, stop. It is non-action, not action. And it's like, what do you mean? I can relaxing my hand is just moving my hand into a new position. Which position is the relaxed position? Like, there is no relaxed position you can move your hand into. The whole point is you stop moving your hand, and whatever it does, that's relaxed. And then relaxation is normalization, is regularization. And our society is the global, that phenomenon you're talking about where being time in America makes you American. It's because it makes you universalist, because universalism is the optimization culture. And we are all being optimized into the thing that we like best, that is most enjoyable. And we can see, man, it doesn't seem good for everybody else, but I'm going to keep doing it because the other alternatives are objectively worse when you look at them. Because if they weren't, the system would start preferring the other thing, because anything you can objectively measure, it will do. And it's all the ways you can't objectively measure it, all the subjective things that are wrong that it doesn't deal with. And so that is a problem for every kind of learning system: recommendation engines, economies, societies, AIs. We're over my whole thing with the criminal liability. It's a scheme to get us to regularize our AIs, because we're overfitting to one big optimal model instead of lots of models. And where by making it criminal liability, where it happens over time, right? Every year that model is in public, it's gaining trust and so you need to and replacing the model with a new model like has this higher cost, because you don't know, it might cause the model to get arrested. And so there's this real, like, it pushes you towards stabler, simpler, and that is what our society needs in AI, in economics, in like recommendation engines, like across the board. We need to learn the value of simplicity to go along with the good value. The beauty of modernism is optimization. I am so grateful for the Green Revolution. I am so grateful for the medical industry. I'm so grateful for the bounty and wonder that being good at optimization brings to me. I don't want to. I am not suggesting a anti-modernist approach, because the people who reject modernism don't understand what it's like not to have modernism. Like, it is. I'm not against modernism. I'm saying yes, and we need to also care on top of that about whether or not our systems are robust, comprehensible, simple enough to survive the unknown. And they're clearly like not. Like, look at what's happening with PG&E. We can't keep the lights on anymore. Our power system's too complicated because we can't maintain it anymore. It's too complicated for us. And like in theory, it's not too complicated, but in practice, it is. And it's because we have one big system, one big modernist system trying to make everything work, and it can't be done. We're not that smart. The founding fathers are right. Federalism is a good idea. Like, and
It's
it's
like
one thing.
main languages, and this is exactly what you're describing is how the French language won in France and why France doesn't speak Occitan beyond certain regions as a third language in school out of some local pride, right? It's just easier, but
Yep.
there's like this threshold up to which it's stressful for a family to learn the lingua franca, and
Yep.
then they pass
Yep.
where they pass like a threshold of incentives
Yes.
where it becomes easier, and then you
They
never
changed
go back. You
what
never.
caused France to consolidate was infotech and roads, like
Yes.
transportation and communication. And transportation is just chemical communication. Um,
Yeah.
Transportation and communication, like are they're the ways information flows around your society. They are the infotech, and you change the infotech, you change the calibration. And when we connected our society up with railroads, basically, and before that, really, even with just like good roads and like good maps, we greatly consolidated. And when we added GPS and shit, we consolidated more and more and more. And what's happened is sparsity used to be the default and connectivity used to be expensive. And now connectivity is the default and sparsity is expensive. And so, like machine learning models, we now have to, because we can afford to have lots and lots of weights. If you have a small model, you don't need to have a complexity loss. You know what complexity loss is? I only have 20 weights. So they're all valuable always. There always is this pressure to reduce how many weights you use. But if you have 500 billion weights, you need some artificial pressure. You have to deliberately re-add sparsity back in. We have to learn to deliberately re-add sparsity back in, and the thing is, not hard pressure, soft pressure. You don't turn off everything. You probabilistically put gentle pressure to force people to consider the trade-off because there is a trade-off. It's not that it's bad to add more optimization. It's not that it's bad to add more complexity. It's that you should be asking if it's worth it or not at every step. And that's the thing that we like. And so if I were to, my suggested law, if you're standing, that'd be the first law with the AIs. The suggested law I would give for complexity comes down to, I would start with the internet because I think the internet is fundamentally, we're all wired cyborgs into the internet with our phones now. And that's how we get our news and information, how we're connected. And the rule would be, we're going to have providers, they're sort of like insurance companies, that build per user predictive models over predicting what you'll show the user tomorrow based on what you showed the user today, right? That predicts the user trajectories, and it predicts it from distribution to distribution. So it's a flow matching algorithm. You have this flow happening, and it has the trajectory of the user and sort of a latent point for every user, and it's predicting what happens next. And for every point of divergence away from that model that you make in what you know what you show them, there is some effectively progressive complexity tax on your that you pay, pennies per user, or maybe it's a percentage of your income. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's some progressive tax that goes up quadratically. That's what, so right, progressive income tax where the percentage goes. You have some tier where it's 5% and then it's 10% of the next tier, and that's a quadratic tax, and that's what Softmax tells you to do, is to penalize it quadratically, and you have a quadratic tax per user on synchronizing it. What that does is it says, if you want to show me a fad, that better be a fad I really, really like. If you want to show me the latest, get me outraged political news, because you can tell it's going well on other people's feeds, you better be damn sure you want to show me that same thing for 5 days in a row, or it's not worth it. And oh, that means a lot of the stuff you show me is noisy garbage you wouldn't show me more of tomorrow. You should stop showing it to me then. That's and that's exact that stuff is exactly the stuff that that you like and you can't stop yourself from clicking on because you kind of want to know and it's kind of enjoyable, but you actually wish it wasn't there. That's it's noise. It's the overfitness. It's fit to the noise of your desire, not just the signal of your desire. And noise of desire is real desire. It's just short-term desire. And signal of desire is the same thing, just over longer periods of time. And if you add it on top of that thing that you really should also do, which is in addition to flow matching over individuals, there's a flow matching loss over the entirety of the system where you also get someone who like predicts your system from itself as a collective, maybe some coarse graining of it. Then if you do it as the parts and as the whole, you stabilize everything. That is enough and you have to figure out exactly, it would be like something like the Federal Reserve, the way they tune interest rates to like the heat of how much they want to heat up the economy or cool it down. You have a tuning knob now, which is like, how much do we want to heat up our information flows and turn them, as you turn the cooling up really high, everyone will get really eternal good stuff, that like things that you could recommend, where there's a series of stuff you could recommend like this forever that would be continually unsurprising. And then if you turn, you won't learn about new important stuff fast. And then if you turn up the heat, you'll explore more. And if people want the hotter feed, they can pay for it. Like if you want more, you might be right. Maybe it's good for you to have more up-to-date, faster information. No problem. Like pay the incremental tax of you get the hot feed. And I think you'd find most people don't give a shit, actually. It's just not that important. But some people might pay the $1 a day, right? And some people might be if you're a reporter, maybe you pay $1,000 a day to like get the fucking feed, to the minute stuff. That's good. You're a specialized cell. You're the person deciding what gets into the Lindy thing. You're the filter. And you're paying for it means you must really care and be using that for you, it's signal. Great, good. It's soft. We don't need to tell anyone what to do, but we need some force that counteracts click-through rate and retention, which are optimality, with simplicity. And I got to run. But
yeah. I think that's a great place to stop. Thank you for your time, Emmett. I've listened to many hours of interviews with you and just the stream of ideas. It's hard to keep up with it, but it's great. Thanks everybody for joining. Until next time.
Bye-bye.